After tireless efforts from her family, government officials were finally paying attention to what happened to Phoebe Handsjuk. However, her family was soon shocked by the coroner's official finding. Two journalists put a spotlight on the case, and more attention seemed to be the best way to bring about justice. This week's episode is The Mysterious Death of Phoebe Handsjuk, Part 3. A bump in the night, your heart fills with dread. Probably a murderer who wants you dead. It could be a ghost, a demon, or worse. Perhaps you're the victim of a witch's curse. It's hopeless, you're doomed. You'd call a priest if you could. You'd rather just listen to who? Sinisterhood.
Welcome to 2023.
We're in a new year. Thanks, everybody, for your patience and kind words as we had to take a pause because our dear, by the way, it's your birthday today. By the time this will be released, it'll be your birthday.
Yes.
January 4th. So happy birthday.
Thank
and
you.
I hope as your birthday gift, you feel better.
Thank you. I'm about 95%, but now my children are not well. So, it's when you have 4 people, the sickness is like months long, and then you have about a week where everyone feels great. So you really take advantage of that. And then the cycle starts back up. And that's how it's been for about 5 years now.
Yeah, pretty much. It was very cute. One of my favorite things is when either Ella or Simon come and say hello before we start recording. And Ella came in to show me her amazing dragon that she got. And she's like, his name is Beanie. And I was like, her poor little voice.
Yeah, she has been running a real high fever since yesterday. So is Simon. But we're Tylenol and a lot of love.
And a lot of love.
There.
It'll feel better.
A lot of Scooby-Doo. Ella's very into Scooby-Doo right now.
I love that.
Which I never really watched as a kid. And in the past week, I have seen more Scooby-Doo than I ever have in my life. I never really watched it growing up. Did you?
We did a little bit with my dad. My sister primarily watched like Pink Panther, Scooby-Doo. She watched a lot of old cartoons with my dad, and then I would want to watch what they were watching.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my exposure to it. But Casey Kasem did the voice of the old ones, right?
Yeah, for Shaggy and I think Scooby. And then Matthew Lillard does the more recent ones. But we've watched stuff from 1998 up until last year. So this show has been around. We tried to tell her, we're like, this show's been around since before Mommy and Daddy were your age. Like, has withstood the test of time. I will say, though, the answer is always robots. Whenever the meddling kids figure out what it is, it's always the most complicated robotic thing that someone has built that's just mind-blowing.
That's the new one?
All of them. I feel like any explanation is, this wasn't a giant ice monster. It was really a bunch of drones that was being controlled by and you're like, and this was a real one we watched. I'm like, how did this? We're all just going to accept it because that's what's fun.
That's intense. It's an intense.
There's some wild
It's not
ones.
just an old man with a mask on was the ones I remember.
Yeah, that still happens too, but they've come a long ways. But so we've been watching a lot of that, which they're always solving mysteries. We're trying to solve some mysteries.
I'd say it's universal, the curiosity of what really happened, and this is a case where we haven't dropped it, even though we aren't covering it. I was still reading documents, reading more evidence, watching more videos while this time that we were off, just because there's so much to take in, and we're doing it in 3 episodes. And a lot of people pointed out, which we'll talk about in this episode, Phoebe's Fall. Mm-hmm. So if you don't get enough out of this, there's also another podcast called Phoebe's Fall that was in 2016, but her family participated in that as well. And then there's the show notes are a wealth of information if you want to dive in deeper and see what else we can't cram it all in here. I mean, we have the coroner's report, the counsel assisting report, her grandfather's report. I mean, I think the coroner's report's like 85 pages. Mm-hmm. So it is eye-opening.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've done a really good, thorough job of trying to touch on everything. PhoebeHandsjuk.com is a really good resource that, man, her beloved grandfather destroys the coroner's report.
Oh, yes.
And he is a very smart man, a retired detective. And what a hard position for him to be in where, you know what should be done. It's not getting done. And now you're the one that's left to kind of do it. And that's the last thing you want to do, is have to read all the gruesome and grisly details of how your granddaughter died.
Just reliving it over and over. But it's the ultimate act of love, because he will not stop.
And as they shouldn't. We talked last time on part 2, the way I really think that cases like this are going to be solved and have justice is by kind of like a grassroots type of campaign, where it's more the families, podcasters, more like boots on the ground type journalism that isn't afraid to say things that maybe larger media doesn't want to say, and also that have probably more of a passion and genuine interest in justice and advocating for victims and their families.
Definitely. And just having people put pressure, because a lot of these officials are elected officials. So putting that pressure and saying, I live in Victoria and I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen in my state.
No. And this is the only time a death like this has happened in Australia.
Yes.
Which, to be the only number of a way something happened, that is a red flag for me.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And a red flag for experts, I think, as well.
Yeah, this whole case is one big red flag. And hopefully, at some point, her family finds some semblance of justice. Of course, no matter what happens, your loved one's never brought back. But if you feel like your voice is heard and that the person you think is responsible is behind bars and can't hurt someone anymore, I think that is very helpful in the process of grieving and healing.
Yeah, definitely trying to find some positive out of an ultimate tragedy.
Yeah. Well, like Heather said, this is part 3. Part 1 and 2 have been over the past couple weeks. We did have to take a week off because of my illness. Well, I'm all better now, and now we can bring part 3 to everyone. So I'm Christy.
I'm Heather.
And let's get into it. After a 5-day investigation by homicide squad detectives, Phoebe Handsjuk's case was passed on to detectives in the South Melbourne Police, where the case was no longer treated as a homicide, according to The Age. Initially, Phoebe's death wasn't widely reported by the media. There was a quick mention of her death in The Age the day after it happened, but that article only stated that a woman was found dead in a refuse room. The next article was 2 years later, in December of 2012, briefly outlining her death and reporting on the fight that had been brewing over Phoebe's family's mission to get a coroner's inquest. In Australia, certain deaths are reported to the coroner. According to a 2016 scholarly article on the nature and duration of coroner's inquests, in Australia, nearly 20,000 deaths, or 12% of all deaths, are reported to a coroner each year. The types of deaths that must be reported to coroners vary by state, but generally include accidents, homicides, and unexplained deaths. Researchers also found that 1 in 20 reported deaths involve an inquest. Inquests go beyond the initial report to the coroner and involve the coroner hearing testimony from witnesses under oath and examining evidence.
The way I understand it, it's kind of like a funnel that many people die each year, and then only a certain amount qualify under this law to be looked at by a coroner. And then of that, only so many are so unusual, or the evidence is so muddled that then the coroner has to hold this long inquest where it's not quite a trial because they're not determining who did it, but it is an investigation into how it happened.
If a death is not it isn't very clear of how it happened, or they think that a crime was involved, they report it. Then the inquest is kind of examining all of the evidence in hopes from the family, if I'm not mistaken, that instead of it just being ruled an accidental death, that something more concrete is going to come out of it.
When it's important to have a precise cause of death, the Coroner's Act says there's kind of 2 reasons. It's you either have the public policy reason of, okay, if this is a bunch of accidents that are all happening at these certain construction sites, we want to know this type of construction material caused this incident, which caused the death, or, this is poisoning at some level. And, you want to get to the root of it. And then on the flip side, from a family's perspective, if it was a homicide versus an accident versus suicide, that could have insurance implications of, if your policy doesn't cover a suicide but does cover an accident, you need that official report to tell what happened. And families, in like the Handsjuks in this case, really had to push to get the inquest, because there was some official pushback of like, well, it's pretty open and shut. And then you look at the evidence, you go, no, it is not.
It's maybe the least open and shut case we've covered. So for anyone to look at this and say, oh, yeah, well, it was definitely just an accident. I, based on the evidence at hand, cannot understand how that conclusion could be made. Is this something that we have in the U.S.?
Not really. I mean, we do have medical examiners who determine causes of death, but if a family like Ellen Greenberg disagree with the medical examiner, you don't really have this coroner's court. You would then file suit against them.
Okay. So it would automatically go to a trial if it got that far. There isn't kind of a step between those two things.
Yeah, and I thought this was actually fascinating, the coroner's court concept, because it does make sense when you say we're here in a court-like capacity where people are under oath, there is testimony, there are these rules of evidence, there's an attorney assisting the coroner because the coroner's not a judge in theory, and if it is non-malicious, it's not a homicide and you do want to get to the bottom of it, it makes a lot of sense to have this court. So I don't think that this is a bad setup as far as how it works in the common law in these, colonial systems where, it's based off British law at the end of the day. And, it's a great idea in theory. And then in practice, you kind of see some of the statistics that it maybe they had a good idea and they put in a lot of stringent rules in a 2008 change in law. And then they realized, oh, they're a little bit too stringent.
Mm-hmm. The Coroners Act 2008 details the procedures for holding these inquests, which are meant to gather information about the cause and circumstances of a death. Unlike trials with judges, juries, and verdicts determining guilt or innocence, inquests are focused on the facts and nature of a death. For the 2 years following Phoebe's death, her grandfather, Detective Sergeant Lauren Campbell, combed through the circumstances surrounding his granddaughter's death and became convinced it was more than an accident. Seeking to prove as much, the Handsjuks began the process of requesting a coroner's inquest. Aunt Campbell, through his attorney, sought to block the inquest. Meanwhile, he received $113,000 from the government as Phoebe's next of kin. He eventually turned the amount over to Phoebe's brothers.
That's one of the moments in the Phoebe's Fall podcast, which again is extremely thorough and was the real first deep dive into this case, when they mentioned it and it was a, you're taking a drink and you spat your drink out moment. I was like, he got what from who now? Mm-hmm. That is shocking to me, that not only are you fighting them to find answers, you're actively using your wealth and connections and your attorneys to oppose this, but then you're taking a check from the government on what I would argue is a false filing of a de facto relationship that we went over last time of like, here are the standards, and you lied in official documents and said that you were a de facto spouse.
No, I'm glad he eventually turned it over to her brothers. Another big red flag and a question mark for me would be, why would you want to block an inquest if at the end of the day, hopefully everyone that loved Phoebe wants to get to the truth?
That's a great question. That's a question that just hangs out there like a stale fart in a room. And I hate to use that, but it's the stench over this case of, why have you been fighting this? Mm-hmm. Why have you every step of the way making it more expensive for her family, to pay more lawyers, to have to file more motions, it's just adding insult to injury.
Yeah. And it's any case we cover, whenever I see someone that's actively trying to close a case and not help the investigation, you have to ask the question of why, what's the motive there? And for me, none of the motives are something that are positive, in my opinion.
Exactly, because if you're trying to suppress the truth, my question is why.
Yeah, exactly. Reporters for The Age spoke with Phoebe's mom, Natalie Handsjuk, who explained the difficulty of finding an attorney to represent the family. Not only was it extremely costly to hire someone, she told interviewers, but because of Aunt Hample's father's background as a former Supreme Court judge, many of the best attorneys in Melbourne were conflicted out as they had previously worked with him or considered themselves biased.
That is just such a sick feeling. And in fact, there are people out there knowing this will do this if they have upcoming litigation. So say you're married and you're divorcing your spouse, and you know your spouse, you're planning on getting divorced, and you know your spouse has great attorneys that are, friends or connections. You can make appointments and go in as a possible client and talk to the attorneys, and then let them know, by the way, my spouse is Bob Smith, and I think I'm thinking about filing. And then once you've done that, you've conflicted out all of these great attorneys. And sadly, that people do that. But in this case, they didn't have to go and do that, because just by virtue of his profession, they were all either so aware of him or had practiced before him so much or whatever that they just turned the family away.
Yeah, that's not how the justice system should work, ideally. I understand if it's a conflict of interest and a genuine conflict of interest, which it might be. If you are deciding before you even know anything other than, oh, this is Hample's kid, nah, we're not going to get involved with this, then that you're not doing your job and holding up the oath that you took when you took that position. Absolutely.
It's very reminiscent of the Murdoch case.
Yeah. It's also, to a much lesser degree, kind of like Erica Girardi. Like she said, my husband was one of the most well-known attorneys in town. Like, no one was going to go against him.
Yeah, that's true.
When I wanted to leave him, when she was saying, she knew what was going on and wanted to leave him and stuff. So, if you're in a relationship with someone that has a high-powered profession, or their family does, when it comes to legal stuff, you're often on the shitty end of that stick. And Absolutely. Your family is too.
Oh, definitely. And what you're talking about, Girardi, also happened with his victims when they said, hey, Tom was representing me, but man, I have $1 million I was supposed to get a hold of. And then you start asking around, and Tom Girardi was a kingmaker. He would decide basically who would become judges in California. Once he put his stamp of approval, you're good to go. And so now people who are extremely vulnerable, like the Handsjuks, like Girardi's victims, are looking to speak truth to a higher power that is so powerful that now it's really hard to find representation.
Phoebe's family began receiving more media attention in late 2012 when reporters from The Age ran a story called What Happened to Phoebe? That garnered even more media attention and offered the family the ability to fundraise for legal representation to assist with the inquest. Despite Aunt Hample's opposition, the Handsjuk family filed a brief in early 2013 requesting the inquest. Phoebe's family argued there was sufficient evidence that a homicide might have occurred. Attorneys for Aunt, on the other hand, insisted that the inquest was not necessary, as there was not enough evidence to support a possible homicide. A few weeks later, the parties were informed that the Handsjuk family's request was granted. The coroner's inquest began August 5th, 2013. Testimony ran for over 3 weeks, and further submissions by attorneys representing Phoebe, Aunt Hample, and the court itself made written submissions through May of 2014. Initially, things seemed positive for Phoebe's family. At a hearing in December 2013, Coroner Peter White had asked South Melbourne Detective Brendan Payne to investigate some issues, including the whereabouts of Phoebe's phone and Aunt Hample on the day of her death and the location of CCTV footage. As the inquest carried on, however, two things became abundantly clear. There was certain evidence permanently lost, and the coroner seemed to have made his mind up despite that fact. In May of 2013, The Age reported that during a preliminary hearing, it was discovered that the building's visitor log from the day of Phoebe's death was missing. It was also revealed at that hearing that in his investigation, Lauren Campbell had spoken to an employee of the Valencia who was questioned by Aunt Hample's friend in the days after Phoebe's death. Well, now people are getting involved that you start to think, what's your role in this? Why are you even involved in this, sir?
Yeah, why are you showing up at the concierge desk? Granted, you live in the building, but there's nothing more than hello, goodbye. There's a mess on the elevator to be swept up. There's not a whole lot that you need to really spend a lot of time talking about the facts of a case that you have nothing to do with except your friend is involved. The missing visitor log, several pages were missing the day of writing who went in and who went out. And, more information gets lost. And that alone to me doesn't say necessarily there was a homicide, but it sure makes me wonder.
Yeah.
Maybe we should dig in.
We're not saying that there definitively was a homicide, but we are saying that this investigation sure as shit was bungled enough to where a more thorough investigation was needed, and we can't say that there wasn't a homicide.
Definitely. You have to comb through it at the very least, especially when things like this start popping up.
At the inquest, Beth, the concierge who found Phoebe's body, testified to the repeated visits by Ant's friend, colleague, and neighbor, Christo Van Egmond, after Beth had returned from leave. During those visits, the friend told Beth over and over that Phoebe's death was a suicide and Beth shouldn't feel bad. According to her testimony, the man told Beth that Phoebe
couldn't be saved. She didn't want to be saved.
All the while showering Beth with gifts of chocolates and wine.
Shout out to Beth for just quietly listening and letting this person say bizarre and borderline incriminating things.
What a difficult position for her to be put in. First of all, she's stumbling upon the scene that she did. That's with you forever. But now it's just constantly being like brought up to you. The chocolates and wine, that doesn't sit right with me. To me, those are, you're trying to sweeten the deal. Maybe a little like bribery, or almost it's insulting too, to think like someone could be bought, or at the very least that subconsciously you're giving them the impression that, look, we're all nice people. Nothing bad could happen. Well, you know what I mean? It's just very icky, the whole thing.
Absolutely. I think it means, to me, it shows how little a rich person thinks of a service worker.
Yeah.
That like, I'll take her a bottle of wine, some chocolates, that'll shut her up.
Yeah.
That's the impression I get. That may not have been his feelings. Maybe he's super nice. Maybe he's such a nice guy, saying something like she couldn't be saved, she didn't want to be saved. You can go fuck yourself, Van Egmond. I don't care who you are. Apparently, he's also some big, popular, whatever. Your currency ain't good with me because I don't know who you are. No. All I know is what you did, and I'm not cool with it. Mm-mm. And I think that shows, just go talk. I'll just go pop by and talk to her. Let me just go talk to her.
No, it's so gross. And to think that you could even say that of her, knowing her for a few months, she didn't want to be saved. When I'm assuming all of the information you have is coming from Ant.
Yes.
So
by a source.
Yeah, by a source that has the same name as an insect.
That it's biased as well.
Yes. In later testimony, Von Egmond confirmed he spoke with Beth, gave her wine and chocolates, but denied visiting her more than once. He also tried distancing himself from Hampel, despite knowing him for 25 years, working with him, living near him, and traveling with him, according to The Age.
My goodness, when you get drug upon to testify, suddenly you're like, I don't know that man.
Yeah. They're like, what about all the chocolates and wine? Yeah, I mean, one time. More than once, I think you only need to do it once for it to be real fucking weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Doesn't make you look any better than to be like, it was only once, though.
And the fact that he then was like, peace, Aunt. Sorry, we've had over 2 decades worth of knowing each other. I gotta ghost you now, is pretty telling.
Yeah, we weren't friends, though. And you're like, well, you went on trips together.
We weren't friends. We just knew it for 25 years. You just kind of knew someone.
It's a long time to have just some dude hanging around.
Mm-hmm. Beth confirmed that the logbook page from that day, the book detailing who entered and exited the building and when, had been ripped from the book itself. The entry that Beth had made about discovering Phoebe's body had also been ripped out of the book with no explanation.
That's what got me. It's one thing if you go, the log was missing. Maybe sometimes the log gets erased or whatever. But if you have it and it's been ripped out, that tells you everything you need to know.
And when stuff like that happens, I'm always like, you idiots. Like, you think no one's going to know that this happened? You can't cover something like this up. It's a huge story. It's a tragic and brutal death that happened in a very expensive high-rise building. It's going to come out. So you removing some written words from your logbook isn't going to change that. It just makes you look super sus.
Yeah, all it does is add to the suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
Because what was it going to say? People came in and out, and also she found the body. She's alive to testify. It's not like you got anything on her.
Yeah. Over 20 witnesses testified at the inquest, and fact after fact was revealed. painting a picture of a bungled, impossible, tampered-with investigation. In addition to the logbook, the CCTV footage that could have helped establish what happened on December 2nd, 2010, was also lost. Building manager Eric Giammario testified how, on the night of Phoebe's death, he insisted to police how vital it was they take the footage right away. Instead, Giammario was confused as to how loose police were at the time, telling the coroner,
I would have thought, given the very unusual circumstances, and again, I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but I would have thought police would have sealed off my office and said not to touch anything because we can't afford to lose anything.
I think that's a reasonable thought to have.
Yeah, he's right. I mean, he was at McDonald's getting food when she called him, when Beth called him and said, this happened. He's like, I'm on my way, hang up and dial 000, get the police there. Runs over there thinking, okay, what can I do to help? Can I secure this? Do you want me to pull the footage for you? And they're like, get away and leave it. So it's
Could
like,
you go back to McDonald's, actually?
Yeah,
That'd
he's
help
like,
us out a lot.
I'll go home. Like, I'll get out of your way. No worries. And then you come back to your office and you're like, oh, so it's just like open? Like anybody could just come in here. You didn't pick up this footage. Mm-hmm. The logbook's ripped apart. Like what happened while I was gone? Because you think you're leaving it in the hands of the people you're supposed to leave it in.
Yeah. Lauren Campbell's investigation took center stage for a part of the inquest. His statement was read aloud for the coroner, after which the coroner was shown footage of retired Detective Campbell's extensive experiments on the garbage chute. The footage in his statement made it clear that Phoebe would
never have the requisite balance or coordination to fit into the chute.
Just after her death, Lauren conducted a series of experiments on a replica of the garbage chute that showed how impossible it was for a sober woman of Phoebe's build and athletic ability to climb in herself. In the demonstration, the model attempts to lift herself into the chute that is 1 meter off the ground, or a little over 3 feet. Identical to the chute on the 12th floor of the Valencia, the replica had nothing on the walls surrounding the chute that could be used to grab onto to help hoist oneself into the chute. The model continued to struggle as she attempted to climb into the 22-centimeter wide opening, or 8.7 inches. During her first attempt, her weight caused the chute door to fall back, virtually closing the opening that she could fall through. On her second attempt, she was able to get the bottom half of her body into the chute opening, commenting the entire time how incredibly difficult it was and how tight the opening was. Eventually, the model was able to fall feet first down the chute, but only with her arms raised over her head. This contradicts the findings of the investigation and coroner, who said Phoebe had her arms by her side and used her hands to brace herself against the side of the chute as she fell. This demonstration pretty much tells me all I need to know.
Oh, yeah, because there's 2 sets of footage. There's the one that he did immediately after her death, and then the later one, which I think the footage is from that investigation, that experiment is what we posted on our social media so other people could see it. And that's what you're talking about, where it's crushing on her legs and stopping her. But I think the number one thing is the coroner concluded that, obviously she put her hands by her side because she put herself down in there. And when you just see the opening is so small, it's just so impossible. Her shoulders out with her arms out, the width doesn't fit. The width of the chute only fits the width of her body. So her arms would have to be above her head. And like you said, there's no handles anywhere. There's nothing to grip. All you're doing is gripping on that. So what'd she do? She stuck herself down in there, pulled herself back up, grabbed a rag, which nobody found and nobody saw, wiped all her own fingerprints off, stuck her hands down next to her side some magical way, which would never happen, and then shimmied her way down into a trash compactor that crushed her foot. Like willingly did that. There's just no way. I don't care how much I've been on Ambien and alcohol. No, absolutely not.
The thing, too, that I was thinking about today, if her intention was to take her own life, why then would she have crawled out of the trash bin trying to find an exit to the room?
That's a great question. And there is studies that most people that do attempt suicide and that survive say, oh, God, the second I did it, I thought, I take it all back. I want to live. I'm so sorry. And people
and that
personally, I've known in my life that have done that. But I think as her family said, we knew her. She and her psychiatrist said, I knew her. I talked to her. This would not be the way that you would choose. A, and B, it's just physically impossible.
Yeah, it's I mean, watching this model who was completely sober struggle to try and do this, you're like, how would someone that is drunk and on sleeping pills be able to, I mean, even just getting there at all would be a struggle. But being able to do that, it's just not possible. And the sticking point is her arms. Yes. They said her arms, based on her injuries, would have to have been by her side. It's just physically impossible that could have happened. Yeah. So, therefore, the way you're saying she fell and died is scientifically and physically impossible. So your whole theory has been destroyed. You got to start over, is how I look at it.
Yes. One would think. But if you're the coroner Peter White, you're like, physics, what? And you sign the finding as is. You ignore the extensive work, by the way. By the way, you're welcome, state of Victoria, country of Australia. Lorne Campbell is a freaking one-man crime solver. He spent so much of his own time and so many of his own hours, not only conducting the experiments, but A, preparing for them, and B, analyzing them afterwards and then presenting the findings. This man has done thousands and thousands of hours of work on this that y'all couldn't even be bothered to say. Yeah. And one of our Australian listeners sent us, I believe it was an email. Did you share that email with me that said, Australia is like the US. In theory, there's great stuff. There's also shitty investigations. It's not, it's normally not like this.
Yeah, sure.
But in this case, they have gotten so much. It's not just, it could have happened, but we just can't be sure because we don't have the funds to conduct the experiments. No. The experiments were conducted.
Yeah. Because Natalie Handsjuk raised $50,000 for the inquest, and then the experiments. I mean, they're using raised money by people that also want answers, friends, family, strangers, as well as their own savings to do something that shouldn't be their financial burden.
Or their emotional and time burden to do. And very generous of the one of the companies that produces these trash chutes, that they worked with Lorne Campbell and said, yes, you can use one of our trash chutes. We'll get you the exact one. So it's 100% just like the one in the Valencia. So your experiment. So again, you're now relying on the kindness of corporations to do this, or having to pay them or whatever, when something, it should have been done as part of the investigation.
And I'm sure they also want to clear their name. That trash chute doesn't want people thinking, oh, you can accidentally just tumble down this to your death, because guess what? You can't. And there's also a huge sign posted by the trash chute at the Valencia that says, do not climb in here. Yes. If you ever were thinking about it, I mean, if someone was determined to do that, a sign isn't going to stop them, sure. But the sheer physics of it would.
Absolutely. And the experiment we just described in the outline here, it shows there's a safety latch where it really doesn't open more than less than halfway, which would, maybe 4 inches ish. And then once she finally gets in it, the lock lets go. And then it really does just become almost 9 inches. But when the lock lets go, it crunches her legs. And she's like, well, now my legs are jammed. Well, the chute company goes, yeah, we did that on purpose in case a person tried to climb in. It crunches your legs so that you don't go down there.
Yeah, well, that's smart. Yeah. In the investigation, they also show that it is not difficult for a large man to put this woman over his shoulders, and then while she is not fighting, throw her down at himself.
Yeah, when she kind of goes ragdoll over his shoulders, he's able to kind of, what you would see a fireman take somebody out of a burning building, over their shoulders. Their behind is, up in the air. Their feet are down by the guy's hip. And then, all he has to do is kind of flip her over and hold her in his arms, feet first. And of course, when someone's unconscious and you're hoisting them in there, what does her arms do? They flop up above her head and she slides right down.
Yeah. There were also a lot of injuries on her wrists and arms and hands that were not indicative of something that would happen from falling down the chute. They were bruises that looked like they'd been caused by someone gripping her. They were in various states of healing, these bruises. So some looked like they had not just happened that day, but, that there were things happening for weeks leading up to this, if not months.
Definitely. The ovoid bruises is what Lauren described them as, which if you take your fingertips and push it into your arm, you see little circles are left behind. So that's generally what an ovoid bruise looks like. Ovioid. I'm not a scientist, man, but I appreciate all the forensic scientists out there.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's why they go to a lot of school and training to do that. And then when you don't utilize those things in your job, it's like, what was the point of this?
Yeah, what's the point of any of it?
Lauren recreated the experiment again for the TV show Under Investigation with Liz Hayes. He also wrote a lengthy response to the coroner's finding, posted on the website phoebehandsjuk.com. Vanessa Levin also provided a statement to the inquest. Ant's friend of over 20 years had also become close with Phoebe during the relationship. Levin was with Ant the night of Phoebe's death in the room where he was questioned. She also mentioned in her statement the odd behavior he displayed in the days after Phoebe's death. While alone, he would be surfing the internet, but in the presence of Phoebe's relatives, he attempted to appear distraught. Levin told the coroner,
"It seemed to me he was turning his emotions on and off."
Levin also confirmed Phoebe was intent on breaking up with Ant in the days leading up to her death, though she was convinced to stay.
That, to me, is damning when you've known someone for 20 years and you say their behavior is odd.
You have a very good measure of what this person acts like. You know, you've got 20 years of examples of this is, pretty the baseline of Ant's emotions. Now this is out of character. So she seems like a very credible witness, and that she was willing to also say that, I think, is telling and also helpful.
Definitely. And I think you say, well, I was there the night of and I rushed to his side because you're friends with this couple, and the man from the couple calls you and is like, oh my gosh, she's dead. You want to go and be with them. But then the more time you spend, your conscience may catch up with you. And when the coroner asks you to testify, you don't fight it. You don't ask for any special treatment. You say, yep, I'll be there. And then that's what you testify. Sinisterhood will be right back. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I'll tell you what I've been doing recently is my bullet journaling for ADHD. I found some special, websites that help me do that specific type of journaling, and it helps me stay very organized. But sometimes, because I do have ADHD, I fall off track, I get distracted, I get busy, then I try to beat myself up. I feel really guilty about it. But that's when I have my BetterHelp therapist who helps me go, you're not a bad person because you didn't journal for one day. You'll be fine.
You need that too. People need that reassurance, and that, we're all doing the best we can.
That's what she tells me. You're doing your best.
Well, when you're at your best, you can do great things, but sometimes life gets you bogged down and you may feel overwhelmed or like you're not showing up the way that you want to.
Working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you, because when you feel empowered, you're more prepared to take on everything life throws at you. Like I said, I use BetterHelp for my therapist. I would never have signed up for this because of it without knowing your experience with therapy as well and how open you were about it. And I just didn't know where to get started or how to even find a therapist. And I liked that I could take a test and find my therapist. And now I love her and I will not let her go.
I love that. And I'm honored that me sharing my story could help you. And it can be very daunting and overwhelming to find one. So, if that's how you're feeling, then BetterHelp is a great alternative to more in-person therapy. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma.
If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge.
If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/sinister today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/sinister. Most damning of all was the electronic evidence around Ant's behaviors in the moments after he supposedly discovered Phoebe was missing. Ant detailed what he found when he arrived home on December 2nd, 2010. He claims he entered the apartment, found a broken glass and blood on the computer keyboard, and then became concerned when he found what he called
a small shrine
on their bed, including photos of him, photos of Phoebe's cats, and candles. However, crime scene photos showed no such shrine on the bed, as he testified.
That's what gets me about this is something that the coroner points to show evidence of her mental state and how depressed she was, and check out the shrine on the bed. And I'm like, there's like 50 pictures, and it's the things that he describes in the shrine. The photo of him is on the bedside table. The photo of the cats are on the dresser. The candles are on the other table. And it's like, it's really bizarre to me that either you went in there and you undid the shrine really quick, which he never testified that he did, or you made it up. Because it's not in the photos.
It sounds like a normal bedroom. I have pictures of my kids and Tommy on, dressers, nightstands, pets, got candles in here. If all of those things were piled in the middle of my bed with, scribblings around that were kind of incoherent words, that could be cause for concern, but that's just not what had happened.
There's just the photos that were taken that night, which if you want to complain, if you're Aunt Hample and you want to go, well, there was a shrine and they didn't get photos. Okay, well, then you should be really concerned that the police are moving things or not photographing things properly, not just saying, and then the photos go, nuh-uh, and you go, and the coroner goes, I'm going with the guy that's saying it, not the pictures.
Yeah. Ant was questioned by the counsel assisting the coroner, Deborah Simensima, why he accessed the computer for 15 minutes after being so concerned about Phoebe's whereabouts. Ant testified he was looking for a note or some search history to explain where Phoebe had gone. Instead, electronic records show he opened GarageBand and iPhoto at 6:19 p.m. and 6:34 p.m. After taking a phone call, Ant then opened iMovie on her computer at 7:10 p.m. There was more activity on the computer at 7:39 and 7:40 p.m. as well. Well, I'm no rocket scientist, but you don't leave suicide notes in GarageBand from what I can tell.
Yeah, that's another thing that was a red flag for me is that he said, oh, well, I wasn't opening GarageBand for me. I was opening it because she had been on it. That's fine. That to me is not the behavior of a suicidal person. Adding GarageBand and iPhoto, looking at photos, and you're straightening your hair, you have your sunglasses on, and you're ready to like that. None of this jives then with the story of I was. But if you say, well, I was looking for some search history, well, the computer evidence didn't show that. You were looking at that.
That's the thing is people want to lie and they think they're real good at lying. And a lot of times people are really good at lying. But technology it doesn't lie for you because it doesn't give a shit. So when there's concrete evidence that this just isn't what happened, yet it still flies in the face of justice and they're like, all right, but we're still going to believe him. It's maddening.
Yes, because you feel like, oh, okay, well, we have 15 pieces of evidence that contradict what he says. And then you have a government official that goes, I'm going with the testimony. I'm sorry, I'm just going with it.
Yeah.
You're like, but why though?
Yeah.
There's what?
And the answer is, well, because his father is very rich and powerful, and so is he, and I like my job, and I don't want to lose it.
That's definitely a possibility.
Ant also testified that he didn't try calling Phoebe after discovering she was missing because he knew her phone was at the repair shop and not with her. However, police notes from that night reference Ant telling officers Phoebe had left her phone at the apartment. He excused this in his testimony, saying,
I have little recollection of what I said to police that evening. I was in a complete state of shock.
In the final report, a footnote indicated that Ant provided his testimony under an immunity provided by the coroner.
Well, let's break this down a little bit.
Please.
The phone is what gets me is that I'm just suspicious about the location of the iPhone. I just don't think it was at a repair shop. And if it was, how about we have the guy that runs the repair shop come and testify and receipts from the repair shop. And I want to see the phone itself be analyzed. Granted, this was 2012, so technology has come a long way, but there's got to be a human that touched the phone that would come and testify and go, yeah, he dropped it off Thursday morning. Remember how we said Wednesday? He got a little confused.
He was in a state of shock.
Yeah, but that's all we kind of have is the night of going, well, her phone's in the apartment, so it's no big deal. And then my question is, at what point did it maybe magically end up at a repair shop?
And that's what's so frustrating about cases like this is all of these things that are being said are traceable. They're very easy to follow up on in any kind of investigation and prove, did this happen or did it not? And instead of doing that, they're all just like, all right, well, you said it happened, so okay. We'll take
He's
that.
a nice man. He comes from a nice family. He's very famous. He did work with AC/DC. Just let him tell his version of it. And you're like, no, I actually would like some evidence of this.
Yeah.
But you know what? He could come and testify however much he wanted because he had an immunity certificate.
Please explain what this means, Heather.
Well, my best understanding reading the Coroner's Act of 2008 in Victoria is that if you're asking someone to testify, so basically the coroners say, we're going to want you to come give evidence. We're having this inquest. FYI, here's the date and the time. We want you to come. The person can say, I refuse to give evidence. I don't want to do that for various reasons. You just say you just don't want to, in which case they might compel you. Or you might say, well, the evidence I might give might lead someone to convict me of an offense. So then the coroner can grant a certificate to the witness. And then that would mean the evidence that they give that a person, I don't know, like Ann Hampel in this case, the evidence that he gave at the inquest cannot later be used in evidence against him. So then you can either choose to go ahead and give evidence with the certificate of immunity, or you can be compelled to give it, in which case it would still have the effect of being immunity because the coroner granted it. But yeah, if I'm reading it correctly, that's it. What the actual statute itself says, in any proceeding in a court or before any person or body authorized by a law of this state, Victoria in Australia, or by consent of the parties to hear, receive, and examine evidence, like the evidence in this proceeding, cannot be used against the person. However, this does not apply to a criminal proceeding in respect of the falsity of the evidence. So my argument would be, the legalese of that translated is, you can't use it against somebody. Well, he testified to the coroner that her phone was at a repair shop. You can't say, well, we think he's lying, so we're going to bring charges. But you could say, we think he's lying, we're going to bring charges for the murder. You could say, we think he's lying, we can bring charges of what would be in America perjury. Mm-hmm. We have this evidence here that the phone wasn't at the repair shop. He told the coroner it was. That's technically a lie. That immunity certificate doesn't grant you the ability to lie to the coroner. It grants you the ability to tell the truth to the coroner, and then people can't use the corpus of your testimony against you in a later proceeding. But I think if you lie to the coroner, you should get nailed for that. And you can.
So is there stipulations to that? I mean, could you say, yeah, I threw it on the garbage chute, and then like no one can use that against you because you have this immunity?
I am happy for an Australian lawyer to reach out to me, barrister to reach out to me, because I would love to know more. The research I did, it seems pretty cut and dry. I mean, It says any body, any investigating body, criminal or civil, and that's a lot of power to give a coroner. That's a lot of power to give a coroner.
And maybe it's standard practice in Australia, but that's, to me, as an American, extremely unusual that of all the people in this case, the coroner has that type of carte blanche to just be like, here's a literal get out of jail free card. We just need you to tell us what happened, but nobody can hold it against you.
It does seem odd in such a preliminary way for that to, like, the coroner's court, again, we're not trying to determine guilt or innocence. So it seems so preliminary to be granting a get out of jail free card, because that's what this is, that I get it. Like, if you're doing a long investigation and, it's like we see in the U.S. with immunity grants all the time. It's usually you grant immunity to a defendant who did less amount of the crime. Maybe they're an accessory after the fact, and they're willing to roll on the true perpetrator. You make that decision as a prosecutor of whether, weighing the pros and cons of really letting somebody go free. In an upcoming episode, we're actually going to talk about that, of somebody that was really more on the ground committing the crime, receiving a way, way, way less sentence, a much, much lighter sentence than the person who was just kind of calling the shots to the crime. And we see that all the time, mafia, kind of RICO stuff. But in a case where it's a single perpetrator, possible single perpetrator murder, it's odd to me that so early on you'd be like, yeah, you say whatever you want.
Yeah, it's a little the cart before the horse type of situation. Guilty or not guilty, I think, if you're agreeing to testify, you want some kind of protection. But again, if objectively you're saying, I only have Phoebe's best interest at heart, I want everyone to feel like justice has been served, I want the truth out there because I loved her. Do you need that? Do you know what I mean? It's just, it seems like from the jump, he was concerned with covering his own ass. And that's for all I know, still today, that's his concern.
It seems like he's treated this from the beginning like an adversarial proceeding, and nobody said it was. Mm-hmm. From the beginning, they said, we want to find out what happened. And it's like, why I don't like you accusing me? And you're like, well, I just wanted to know what happened. What? Yeah. Well, I don't want an inquest where I'm going to be drug up in front and people are going to accuse me of stuff. Oh, we just wanted an inquest because we want to know what happened to her. Like, it's just immediately out the gate. Well, I'll only testify with the certificate of immunity.
It seems like a bit of projection, guilty projection, perhaps, or, you know, I mean, before even the he didn't even want the inquest. He tried to make it as difficult as possible for that to even happen. He's rich as fuck. He could have easily paid for that to happen to, you know, find out, I want to know exactly what happened, you know, but that's just wasn't the case. And I think people's true colors shine when their ass is on the line like this.
Yeah, and it's just it must just be the nature of the coroner inquest system that because it's not meant to be adversarial, you are able to give that carte blanche, like you're completely immune from anything regarding this, because all we're doing here is trying to figure out what happened, when in fact then my argument is then the inquest wasn't the best place for this. The coronial inquest wasn't the best place for this. It should have been treated more as a homicide, but the irony is you can't get it treated as a homicide till the coroner says it was a homicide. So it's like very catch-22. Yeah.
Well, and if the coroner's given the one person that might be able to tell you what happened immunity, then you've completely like shut down the case before it's even really started. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you definitely, they're starting, it puts them way, way, way back in any type of civil or criminal justice. In addition to hearing testimony from the witness, the coroner also gathered physical evidence. One issue was Phoebe's iPhone. Her Nokia phone had never been recovered, though her iPhone had been given to police on December 8th, nearly a week after her death. When police received it, the software being used by police was unable to read the SIM card. They returned the card and phone back to Aunt Hampel after the initial failure to obtain information. Aunt then gave the phone away and claims he lost the SIM card. Police testified that given the updates to technology between 2010, when the death occurred, and 2013 at the inquest, they would have been able to analyze the SIM card if only they had access. So the key here really is early on, within the first 6 or 8 weeks, police determining it was an accident and they didn't need any more evidence and just letting it all go. Instead of saying it's undetermined or it's a possible homicide. And my question would be, as a citizen of this area, again, you ask yourself, what can we do? I want to know who said that was okay to get rid of evidence, and who was pressuring the police to say that it was not a homicide. Like, come on, it's George Hampel's kid. You're not going to say it's a homicide. It's going to be a stink all over him. Just go ahead and market it that it was an accident, and we'll just let it all go. And then by the time anybody does get wind of it, then, well, whoopsie, it's gone. I also would like to know why they chose to give that stuff back to him and not her family. Well, he's the de facto spouse. So That's second true. That she died, he ran to whoever told him he got some really good legal advice. Run as quickly as you can and file a document lying and saying you're common law married, because he did. If you look at the facts, that's what he did. And that's what happens. That he gets the money, he gets the evidence, he gets the calls from the cops. And then he conveniently gives away the phone, which who does that ever? And just loses the SIM card. If this is the phone that the love of your life had with her when she tragically lost her life, one might keep it for sentimental value. At the very least, you would probably hold on to it just because it's evidence in the case. Absolutely. Much like the cell phone repair shop person, where are they at? Where's the recipient of the phone? And was the recipient the ocean? Yeah. Yeah. The iMac computer Phoebe shared with Aunt was also not seized until 4 months after her death. Police searched it for 5 days, using a limited set of keywords from the coroner, according to Phoebe's family. Her outgoing emails had all been deleted. When Phoebe's family looked into conducting an independent analysis of the computer, it would have cost over $12,000. One particularly odd thing found in digital records was Aunt's computer accessed a release of body form from the coroner's website in October of 2010, months before Phoebe's death. They shared the computer, so maybe she looked it up. But it was also technically, he made it clear it was his computer
that he let her use and they shared it, but it was his, but that's why he wanted to get it back. But that's a weird thing to look up.
I looked up what this is in Victoria, and basically it's a form that you got to fill out to give the coroner if you want the body released to you. And usually people don't do that until their loved one has passed, because how would you know to do that? Or in this, if it's like a terminal illness and you're expecting something, if someone's in hospice, then to get all your ducks in a row, you might fill that out early on so it's a smooth process once they do pass. None of those things were the case with Phoebe.
Weird thing to search.
Yeah.
Real weird thing to search. But yeah, the computer is another one that they didn't take it the night of because, and I'm quoting here, it was important to his privacy. I don't give a fuck.
No.
I don't care. There was a crime committed. I don't care. Take a shit. But there was so much deference. At the very least, the amount of, even if you say, I think it was a tragic accident, even if you don't believe science or anything that we're telling you, whatever, that's your right to keep your head in the sand. However, you have to ask yourself, do you want there to be two forms of justice, which we all have in many countries, where the really, really rich people get 1,000% deference and anybody that doesn't make below, probably middle class gets treated like absolute fucking dog shit. So if this was in a really, really impoverished area and a woman died mysteriously and the guy had no parents at all, or his parents were, rabble rouser nobodies, you think that they would be like, you should keep the computer,
or people
keep
of color.
Phone. Yeah, keep the phone. Keep it. Don't worry. We don't want to bother. Hell no. They go in and they fucking put caution tape over everything. Or they would just go, we really don't care about that murder, and leave that one too. But
that's probably the most likely scenario, unfortunately.
But this idea that it's just so much deference. Well, poor Ant, he needs his computer. Well, if he's so rich, go buy your own computer.
It also makes me think, sure, we all want our privacy, but unless there's something real fucked up that you don't want other people seeing, why would you care if they had it? You know what I mean? Like, so what? You've searched a couple of like weird porn sites you don't even want to know about. Okay. But if you've searched like how to dispose of a body after I've killed someone, that's a little bit different. It's very sus that he would not want to just give that up to help. But also, unless you're doing something wrong that you need to be kept private, in the case of a potential homicide has occurred here, at the very least, a tragic death has occurred. Bye-bye privacy for the time being. Like, that goes out the window, because the top priority is finding out what happened here, not protecting someone's privacy.
100%. And especially if the victim, it's a close, not relative, but, a close relationship of the victim, and the victim's death is unsolved because it happened 30 minutes ago, and you can't immediately go, well, it's obviously a suicide. Just leave everything here and let's go. But this is the same thing that happened with Ellen Greenberg, where they left all her computer, all her digital, everything in the custody of her fiance. And I'm not out here to train police officers, but whoever is, here's a fun thing. I have an idea. How about if you don't have the case solved already, you treat everybody as a possible suspect and don't let any of them have access to extremely sensitive forensic evidence. Just a thought.
I completely agree. The coroner focused on Phoebe's consumption of alcohol and Stilnox prior to her death. Toxicology reports showed she had been drinking enough to put her 3 times over the legal driving limit. She also had traces of the sleeping pill Stilnox in her body, known as Ambien in the U.S. According to experts, the actions and behavior of people on Stilnox do not comport with the way Phoebe died. Several experts commented on the case to reporters from The Age and the host of the podcast Phoebe's Fall. The experts concluded that while Stilnox may encourage people to sleepwalk and do everyday tasks like cleaning, cooking, or driving, it does not encourage odd behavior like climbing into a garbage chute.
Yeah, and the psychiatrists who have studied not just Ambien, Stilnox, as it's properly used, but then also studying it when it does get stacked with alcohol or with people who have a bad reaction to it, that the studies have shown over and over and over and over again is that your body goes on autopilot and it does things that it does every day. So, like you drive home from work and then like you're home all of a sudden and you're like, oh shit, like I remember leaving the grocery store and I remember pulling in the driveway, but every turn in between, I do not know what that was. It's that part of your brain that kicks on where the rest of your brain's supposed to be asleep. And so every time in a study, they're like, oh, a person, I believe it was Ambien that David Sedaris' sister was on in one of the stories. He talks about she woke up. Gretchen is like a big animal lover, and she woke up in the night and was like eating a bunch of crackers and didn't know that because she was supposed to be asleep. And the next morning she found her turtle's bug crackers were all gone. And she had no idea that she had just she sleptwalked, woke up, walked in the kitchen, ate a bunch of wheat thins, she thought, and then went back to sleep. And then when she woke up the next day, it was compressed bug squares. But it's just that like mindlessness of like, oh, a midnight snack. But she didn't say like, oh, and then I took the turtle and I strapped it to my head like a helmet. And then we walked outside. It's like you don't do things that are completely out of touch with reality. Yeah. You do rote exercises. And climbing in a garbage chute would not have been that rote exercise.
No.
And this amount of alcohol and Ambien alone knocks me out, and then 3 drinks on top of that, and I weigh way, way, way more than Phoebe. I mean, she weighed like $125 maybe.
She was very slender. Yeah. The reenactment showed that a sober person has difficulty doing this. So when you have all that in your system, I don't see how it could possibly happen. And obviously, it's not something she's done before. So this would be the first time she's ever done something like that. So it's not like your muscle memory kicks in of like, oh, this is what I do after I take the trash out.
It's like a path of least resistance as well. So if you told me that she woke up on Ambien and walked and put her trash in the trash chute and walked back in the apartment and fell back asleep and has no recollection, I would believe that. Because again, it's a rote behavior, a rote exercise. Sure. She lived in the building. She would know exactly where to go and exactly where to come back. But that is so out of the ordinary and also just physically impossible especially given her parents said every time she drank 1 drink in, she was tripping and falling down and knocking stuff over.
On December 10th, 2014, Coroner Peter White released his findings. He began with quotes from Aunt, pointing out that Phoebe had mental health issues. The coroner quoted,
"Dark thoughts,"
from her diaries and detailed her binge drinking. Counsel assisting Deborah Semensima recommended an open finding due to the sheer amount of evidence lost, meaning the cause of death would be listed as suspicious without specifying the actual cause. The coroner disagreed and instead chose to ignore the many inconsistencies between Aunt's testimony and the evidence, as well as the many pieces of evidence lost. Coroner Peter White instead concluded that while on a combination of Stilnox and alcohol, Phoebe had climbed into the garbage chute and fallen to her eventual death. He said he didn't blame police for leaving evidence behind given the circumstances. He even said it was acceptable that investigators left the laptop in Aunt's possession, since the police were
concerned about Aunt's privacy.
I really hate all of this because from the beginning, the coroner's findings, I feel, are painting this picture of her like a broken girl that was just bound for suicide and there was no stopping it. And that's just not the case. There was so much more to her. Ask any of her family and friends. Sure, she drank. She used some drugs. She had issues with depression and anxiety. Guess what? So do I. I hope that if I was found at the bottom of a trash chute, that people wouldn't immediately assume that that was my whole life and that was everything about me, And so they've just made her seem like, it's very victim blaming to me, and they've made her seem like this wounded little bird instead of a grown woman that was in an abusive relationship and ...
Yeah, I just got really choked up and started crying while you were saying that because I hope that we as an entire society have come further than this, and this was 2013, 2014, that we wouldn't look at certain victims more worthy than others of investigation and wouldn't say, because, I mean, and we'll link it in the show notes, I was so mad when I read the things that he chose to pull out about her were all.
It's all just, it's like, well, she drank a lot. I mean, it's like, it's akin to a woman getting raped and then someone saying, well, she was wearing really short shorts and a tube top and, I mean, it's...
Or even she was a sex worker, so she was exposed to this all the time. She was drinking all the time, so obviously she was going to stumble and fall and die. Whoopsie. And instead of saying, no, this was a whole person with a whole entire life before the 14 months she spent with this shitbag, that should also be taken into consideration. But instead it was, what do you want us to just write? Say it out loud, and then we'll write the thing that you said. Also, you have immunity, and then we'll just hit print and we're good to go. And Deborah Siminsima was she's not an advocate for the family necessarily, but an advocate for the truth. And it just so happens that the family's interests are in line with truth and justice. But it is sickening to read this guy should be fucking ashamed of himself. And again, if he's an elected official and you live in Victoria, make sure his ass don't get reelected. Although the rich get richer and people end up staying, in their positions of power. But to read somebody, to me, the subtext of this reads like exactly what you said. She was bound on suicide. She was just lost. Fuck it. Scrape them off. Give up. Who cares? Why are we even wasting our time on this? And it's insensate. It makes me so mad. And we're not related at all. I don't know her. We're not related. But I feel like...
Well, you're a compassionate person. And I feel like compassion can unite all of us. I mean, we say all the time, like, the worst day of your life should not define you. This was clearly the worst day of her life and in the end of her life. And for her 24-year life to just be summed up like this, and his shitbag friends telling people, oh, she couldn't be saved and blah, blah, blah. You have her family that's known her. I'm like, tears are literally streaming down my face right now.
I mean, her family knows her. They don't know her.
And I mean, and her family's been saying, this is not her. Her dad's a fucking psychiatrist. Like, she was seeing a psychiatrist, and even her psychiatrist, who, when all is said and done, I don't think that psychiatrist is the best trained one, but she said, I did not think suicide was imminent. Her family said, yes, she struggled with depression, but it wasn't something that any of us were worried about. And that can be the case a lot of times when someone does actually take their own life, But in this case, it just doesn't make any sense. If she had been found in the apartment, all of this in her system, and had just passed out, maybe I could buy accidental or maybe even intentional overdose. But throwing yourself down a garbage chute that you physically can't even fit into the way that they're saying you could fit into, it just doesn't add up. Like, you don't have to even be a detective to know that, like, these A does not equal C here.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it makes you sick because you know the truth, right? You know the evidence that we have, and to see her painted with such a broad brush, and to see, my thing is, like, you're saying the quiet part out loud. If you want to be a shitty coroner and be fucking bad at your job, be fucking bad at your job and just be like, I don't understand this evidence. But my thing is, you're now manipulating the narrative in order to fit the narrative of a person. This is not the Aunt Hample show, and we got to make him, exonerate him. Well, that's exactly what it turned into. So I'm like, we've all completely lost our eye on the ball, which is the truth, the justice, getting an answer for her. And just go, if you want to just get real mad today or cry, either one, click on the show notes and read the coroner's first page, and the quotes that he chose are inappropriate. They're inappropriate.
Well, and at the very least, like you said, if you want to say, I can't say that this was homicide. Okay, but you don't have to definitively say it certainly wasn't. This was a, quote, freak accident. Those words were used, a freak accident, in an official report by the coroner. You could, at the very least, do what Deborah Siminsima is suggesting and have an open finding. So therefore, we're not saying it was murder. We're not saying it wasn't. But we know that we can't definitively say that this was an accident or a suicide.
And that's exactly the correct, and what her family said. They said, listen, we get it. A bunch of stuff has been lost, and it just may never be found again. And that's okay. And listen, we're going to do our best with this open finding, and that's just going to be all we're going to have. But it's such a slap in the face to ignore her and then go on top of that and borderline, I won't say defame, but like just besmirch the final reputation of a woman who is now dead. And to just go, you read her diaries. They were so sad and terrible. And she had sad, dark thoughts. And she was a sad little girl. It's just rubbing salt in the wounds of her family to be like, she was a broken bird that would never be fixed again. It's absolutely sickening.
I totally agree. Phoebe's family was understandably disappointed. Natalie told reporter Liz Hayes that she had hoped for an open finding.
Because so much evidence was lost.
In addition to shutting the door on possible further investigations, the coroner also fully exculpated Aunt Hampel. According to Phoebe's fall, Aunt's attorneys had pressed for this outcome to be included in the finding as well. This came despite counsel assisting submission, which called several items of Aunt's testimony
reconstructions,
and wrote,
"No positive finding can be made on the balance of probabilities as to Mr. Hampel's involvement." And let's give credit where credit's due to Deborah Semensima, who went through all the evidence, was asking extremely tough, difficult questions, and had the wherewithal to write accurately her recommendation and not bow and kowtow to wealthy, powerful people. And I hope that she did not see any backlash in her employment, in job opportunities to move somewhere else to be like, oh, well, you remember what she did to George Hampel's kid? Don't hire her. Like, I hope she is seen as an ethical, upstanding barrister, attorney, counsel, because she absolutely is. It takes a lot to write that, especially when you have an army of rich lawyers pushing you. And I think she is the hero of this coroner's inquest, and it shows what a weak bitch coroner Peter White is. And I said he's a weak bitch. But you know what I mean? When you're under an extreme amount of pressure like that, and I think because this is pre-Phoebe's Fall podcast, right now all this is a coroner's inquest that's being a little bit reported on. This is before Richard Baker and Michael Batchelor got a hold of it and really made it a larger story. And so when you have the public not on your side, you have the authorities not on your side, you have really, really rich people not on your side, and you have powerful people in your profession not on your side, it takes a lot of balls to do what she did, and she done did it.
That's what will eventually change the system, because yes, the rich keep getting richer because people bow to them and allow them to stay in power. If we have a lot of Deborah Semensimas that are like, fuck it, no, I don't care who the fuck you are, this woman deserved justice. Also, regardless of who this is, they deserve justice. My job is to be unbiased. It is just to tell the truth. So I really don't have a dog in this fight other than the justice. I'm just trying to find out the truth. I don't have a personal vendetta against Mr. Hampel. I just want to know what happened, period.
Yeah, she understood the assignment and she did it. But the problem is she's not the coroner, right? She was just the opinion, and he could choose to ignore it. And bizarrely, he did. But again, it's not bizarre. We know why.
Because the coroner had followed the law but chose to ignore key pieces of evidence, Phoebe's family was in a tough spot. At the time, the only way a family could challenge a coroner's findings was on a misapplication of law. Here, they were essentially stuck. Though they could have attempted an appeal, they would have gotten only one shot at it, and it would have cost them enormous legal fees. The law at the time would have required the Handsjuks to pay the legal fees of other parties involved if the appeal was unsuccessful. Disappointed, Phoebe's mom, Natalie, told Marie Claire in 2016,
"Natural justice is now the only thing we're going to get out of this. Karma will come to whoever has been involved. We just have to be patient."
I really relate to this. I think if I was in this situation, this is the conclusion I would also come to, that the universe is going to eventually take care of it. I'm not talking about woo-woo stuff, but like eventually dues are going to be paid. Someone's going to talk, something's going to happen, something will come out. And that's what I would have to hang my hope on to be able to just exist day to day.
Oh, absolutely. And I believe the number was around 400,000 was the estimation of the fees that she would face if she lost. And because of the way the law was written, she would have lost because he didn't misapply the law. He only ignored key pieces of evidence. The very narrow way that the Coroner's Act 2008 was written was that you're hosed, that if you don't like how we analyze the evidence, tough. So they could have tried to appeal, and you say, okay, well, I appeal and then I lose. So then I'll appeal again saying, well, then the law needs to be changed. At least in the United States, that's like you can appeal on asking the court to change the law. But in this case, it was just, you know for sure you're going to lose because the law is not on your side. And do you have $400,000 to set on fire? And the answer was absolutely they do not.
No, few do. You know who does? Aunt Hampel.
Yeah, I bet.
In October of 2016, Aunt's sister Christina Hampel posted a photo on Facebook of herself alongside Phoebe and wrote,
"In loving memory, I just stumbled across my favorite pic of beautiful Phoebe. I miss you, darling. You were a fragile little flower that no one watered. You and your family were let down by the justice system and those who represent it. I only hope that one day the truth will come out so that they will have some peace.
The post was taken down, but not before it was sent to reporters from The Age, who were producing a podcast called Phoebe's Fall, detailing Phoebe's case.
Yeah, Richard Baker and Michael Bachelard are incredible. They are reporters for Sydney Morning Herald and has The Age. It's kind of all related. And Natalie Handsjuk reached out and said, hey, this happened to my daughter. We're going through this inquest. They were recovering the inquest here and there. But this post on Facebook really made, I believe it was Michael Bachelard, say, we're on to something. Because why would you post that?
And then it was taken down very quickly.
Yep.
I imagine people saw that and said, hell no, delete that right away. But for whatever reason in that moment, she spoke these words, and it doesn't seem like it's just something that you accidentally say. It seems like she's definitely implying something. There's an inference there that something happened, and she knows that something happened.
Well, and a little bit of background, they call her Chrissy Hample. She had been arrested she had a substance use issue with doing cocaine and possibly dealing cocaine. Magically, the charges all got dropped, probably because of who her parents, her dad and stepmom are. But she's kind of this like black sheep of the family. But she was the one that when Phoebe and Aunt started dating, that Chrissy was lending clothes to Phoebe, and Phoebe cut her hair that was long and brown to be short and black like Chrissy's hair. So I wonder if they had, and it's a very beautiful photo of the two of them together. It's black and white. So, you wonder if you make this connection that you're maybe struggling with substance issues. Phoebe opens up to you about her struggles, that you guys are related, and you see the way she died. And you see the way your family reacted, that said she was just a drug addict, depressed, sad little thing, whatever, write her off, throw her in the garbage, fuck it. And I wonder if you go, what the fuck would they do if something happened to me?
Yeah.
Would they treat me the same way as her because I had the same issues as her, or would they treat me that? But I believe it was up for 12 or 15 hours, like not an entire day even. But thankfully somebody screenshot it.
Once it's posted, just assume it has been screenshotted.
Sinisterhood will be right back. They say that hair care is the new skincare, but there is one brand that has taken it to the next level.
With a cult-like following, Kitsch has created game-changing essentials beauty enthusiasts swear by.
From satin pillowcases to time-saving towels to their classic hair ties and scrunchies, Kitsch knows hair care doesn't stop in the shower.
Started in 2010 by selling hair ties door to door, literally just hustle and a dream. Kitsch is self-funded, female-founded, and now carried in over 20,000 retail locations.
Kitsch's best sellers include satin pillowcases, caps, and eye masks. Their satin is vegan and cruelty-free, and they are so great for your hair and skin while you sleep. They also have shampoo and conditioner bars. Yes, bars. Bottle-free beauty, y'all.
I love those shampoo bars.
Oh, it's great. It's good to travel.
Yeah, very good. And I also just feel better because I don't have this giant chunk of plastic in my hand that I'm squeezing something out of. It's just like a soap bar, and then when it's gone, it's gone.
Right there.
Also, the heatless satin curling rollers say bye-bye to heat damage. There are TikTok videos of people throwing away their $600 curlers for this. The amazing thing, this is only a fraction of the price at $18. I've said it before, best curls I've ever had. You just sleep in it, and then you wake up, and it's like the best blowout you've ever had, and it lasts for days.
I was going through old photos and videos to make kind of a year-end, like, thanks, everybody. And I was like, damn, Christy hair is on fire in that picture. And I was like, oh, that's the
We were in
Kitsch one.
Chicago.
That's right.
Yep. That's
Your hair
when it
looks
happened.
so good.
It does
looks
look
so
good. I'm telling you, it's so easy. You just put it in your hair and then you go to sleep. You don't even have to do anything.
My favorite part is you kept going, the curls, they won't stop. You're like, it's been 3 days and it's still curly. And I was like, dude, Kitsch got you, man. Mm-hmm. Well, right now, Kitsch is offering you 30% off of your entire order at mykitsch.com/sinister.
That's right. 30% off anything and everything at mykitsch, spelled mykitsch.com/sinister.
One more time, mykitsch.com/sinister for 30% off of your order.
Eventually, Aunt Hample moved on. He got married after Phoebe's death, but then divorced. Single again in 2016 at age 49, he began dating 23-year-old model Bailey Schneider. On June 23, 2018, Bailey was found unconscious with a gold cord wrapped around her neck on the kitchen floor at her parents' home. Her parents were suspicious, given the disparity in her height in the areas in the kitchen where she could have harmed herself. A coronial inquest was also opened into her death, and Richard Baker, the reporter who had spearheaded investigations into Phoebe's death, covered Bailey's death as well. Ant claimed he and Bailey were not seriously dating, according to The Age, but phone records show frequent contact as well as trips that the two took together. Bailey also took out a life insurance policy on herself 3 weeks before her death. Despite the anomalies, the coroner's inquest also determined there was no third-party involvement and that Bailey died by suicide. This is also extremely heartbreaking, and it also does not make sense. Bailey was found with a gold cord wrapped around her neck very tightly, but she was on the ground. It did not appear that she had done this to herself. There was not a spot in the area she was found where she could have done this to herself.
And yet the coroner said that it was suicide for sure, and that surely he wasn't involved either.
And that morning, Bailey had told her mother that she had broken up with Ant. The two had broken up that day or just the night before. It was very recent.
A lot of parallels.
A lot of parallels.
And another family who has been failed by the coronial system.
Yes. The attention on Phoebe's case, and in particular the Phoebe's Fall podcast, released in 2016, caused movement in the Victorian legal system. Prior to Phoebe's case, the appeal window had only been 28 days, with appeals only allowed on the narrow grounds of a misapplication of law. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, between the Coroner's Act's passage in 2008 and the time of the podcast in 2016, only one single appeal had been made against a coroner's finding in Victoria. Following the release of the podcast, a public outcry ensued and prompted officials to comment on the difficulties families like the Handsjuks faced when trying to appeal a coroner's finding.
I thought that was very telling that in the newspaper's investigation, they found only one single case was successfully appealed or was appealed at all. And I think that shows that you have written a law that is inappropriately narrow for the public policy issue that it was designed to address.
It seems like it's a law to say, look, we want everyone to have a fair chance, but it's written in such a way that they know no one is going to have a fair chance. And so it's just kind of for show.
Or they write it in a way going, well, we really are concerned because we don't want a lot of appeals if angry families are upset. And so we want to make it really hard to appeal. But then you ask yourself, does that serve the public policy purpose of the coroner's court, which is the job of these inquests is to actually determine the real cause and then stop whatever that cause is, whether, like I said, it's an accident because there needs to be better regulations on construction sites, or whether there's a person out there that's murdering women who seem suicidal and have substance use issues and, you know, is repeatedly murdering them. That would be also another thing that you would want to stop. So making it so difficult to appeal, you're absolutely stopping the initial purpose of the coroner, which is to stop further deaths in the same manner.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense. You know what just occurred to me, though? And I don't know. I guess if you're a lawyer in the United States, you can't practice in another country, but we need Kathleen Zellner on the case.
You can. You just have to, what's the right word for it? I mean, you'd have to get, like, my old boss at the law firm I worked at was also a barrister in England because he, went through all the hoops that you have to be. It would be like if you're an attorney from another country and you came to the States, there's a couple of boxes you have to check, some tests you have to take, and you can practice. But there's nothing that says you can't have a consultant that isn't there to practice law, but is there simply as a consultant. And you're right, man, but Kathleen Zellner figured out. Normally she exonerates people that have been wrongly convicted, but what if you convict people that have been wrongfully exonerated?
Oh, yes.
We need bizarro Kathleen Zellner.
Yeah.
And it's Australia, so everything's upside down.
Oh, that's true. So she just goes there and then it works itself out.
Problem solved.
In 2018, it became possible for families to challenge the weight of evidence of a finding, meaning that the error in law caused the coroner to misapply the facts to the law. The change in law also extended the appeal window from 28 days to 3 months. This change would have allowed Phoebe's family to appeal her case more easily. Attorney General Martin Pakula made a statement on the premiere of Victoria's website, saying,
"We want to make sure that families can apply to the coroner's court to reopen an inquest, regardless of when the initial inquest or death occurred."
But wouldn't that mean that there's no appeal window? That you can do it whenever? Because they're saying, well, you have 3 months.
I don't think 3 months is enough time, in my opinion, especially given that I would say you have two things here, and Lauren Campbell will address this in the next bit we'll discuss, but I think you would either say we're going to remove the financial burden of appeal and make it only 3 months, or we're going to remove or make it much, much longer, say 3 years, 5 years, if it's a death. I mean, the problem is I think in America, murder doesn't have a statute of limitations. If it's a death, you shouldn't have that. You shouldn't have 3 months. But even so, if you want to be reasonable, say, okay, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, pick a number. But you can't have both. You can't rush them in 3 months and then also make it an extreme financial burden, or not even burden, but like risk. It's a burden because you do have to go ahead and pay your appeal attorney. But on top of that, this risk of if I lose, I pay the other side's fees. You may need more than 3 months to fundraise. You may need more than 3 months to just like pray and be like, should I do this? Like, should I bankrupt my life for this? Otherwise, it's like, do you want to do it now or no? Do you want to lose all this money now or not? And then the family just goes, okay, well, I guess we can't. We don't have that.
Yeah. I do not like feeling pressured into making decisions, especially when I think that they are very big decisions. And this seems like the biggest decision you could have. And to pressure someone that is already in a very vulnerable and emotional state, you can't have all of these things. Something's got to give.
Yeah.
At the time, Lauren Campbell told the host of Phoebe's Fall that the change in law was welcome, but that there was still a gap in the review provisions, particularly in the financial risk associated with appealing. Because the Hamples, the police department, and the coroner would all be represented at the Supreme Court appeal, if Natalie lost, she would be responsible for all legal fees for all parties. Lauren told hosts Richard Baker and Michael Bachelard,
"If we lose, Natalie loses her house.
And you've already lost your daughter, so what are you're in between a rock and a hard place. I feel like you really don't have a choice but to say, okay, well, I can't do that."
No. And Attorney General Martin Pakula about dislocated his shoulder, jacking himself off about all these changes. Oh, we made all these changes. Oh, it's so good for the families. This needs to be overhauled. I don't live there, so I don't have a dog in the fight. But I would say if you do live there and you find this upsetting and that you want change to be made, figure out what politicians are in charge, and that's what you need to lobby for, because as it is, the little bitty, I mean, they made like a tiny little incremental change, and we're like, look at what we've done, like all politicians. I'm not shitting on Australia. All our politicians do it all the time. They're like, congratulations on doing your job. But in this case, it was like such a little minor jump, and they just tried to just go, look what we've done. I will say, credit where credit's due for Richard Baker and Michael Bachelard. Their podcast is why that happened. Their podcast coming out with it pissed enough people off, got enough people going, what happened now? Who did what now? To complain. And then the politicians in charge said, okay, well, we need to look at some of these rules and figure them out. Not enough. Exactly what Lauren Campbell said. It didn't matter. The change didn't matter, because even if she had 3 months to appeal it, she still doesn't have the amount, her entire life savings to wipe out to risk this. Because who knows how high up the conspiracy goes. But you know what I mean? You appeal the Supreme Court, even if the law is on your side, you might still lose.
I will say, one, I think we do have a dog in this fight, even though we don't live there, because we all want justice, regardless of where anybody lives. Also, I think that this shows that if enough people start yelling about something, they do notice. And yes, this was a small change that really wasn't even a change that really helped anyone. But it proves that if enough people start yelling, they have to listen. So what does that mean? We have to yell louder. And then the more that happens, maybe an actual change that is worth a shit will happen.
Oh, absolutely. And I just meant I don't live there. You're right. For this case specifically, for the Handsjuks, and for anybody who's killed, especially intimate partner violence, especially if somebody's getting away with it, especially if they, I don't know, there's a possibility something happens again. Yeah. That I think that is, for every life we can save, it's an important, valuable thing. It's incredible that the podcast got the attention on the case that it did. And I think that's great. And I just think that, like you said, more pushing.
Yeah. The Handsjuks continue to hold out hope. Lauren told 60 Minutes Australia in 2021.
I guess we just hope that someone out there who has knowledge of this is going to feel a bit of a pang of conscience and come forward.
If you have information that could help, you can report that information anonymously to Victoria Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. If you're struggling with mental health in the U.S., use any phone to dial 988 and reach the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Listeners in the UK can dial 116-123, and in Australia, you can dial Lifeline at 131-114. Aunt Hampel was found not to be responsible for either the death of Phoebe Handsjuk or Bailey Schneider, and we are not suggesting otherwise. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence. If you are experiencing domestic violence in the United States, contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE or text START to 88788. In Australia, reach out to the National Domestic Family and Sexual Violence Counselling Service at 1-800-737-732. So what do we think?
Why don't you begin?
Well, judging by the evidence at hand, and this is my opinion, I absolutely think that Aunt was involved.
Suspicion, mince words.
It doesn't make sense to me to think anything else. I think it's physically impossible, and I think the demonstration showed that, for her to have climbed in there herself. I think that so much evidence was just overlooked and not gathered. The footprints running away from their door, the whole scene in the apartment, things not being tested, the fact that her blood was found on the garbage chute handle, but no fingerprints. How can you have both of those things?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe somebody planted a little drop of blood on there. I don't know. I'm just saying.
When you're wiping it, you got a little sloppy when you're wiping it.
Yeah, or maybe you left something off when you're wiping it. The fact that her pants were down around her knees and her belt was only through 2 belt loops on her jeans. Maybe she was interrupted getting dressed. Perhaps a fight ensued in the apartment and she was getting dressed to try and leave the apartment and things went sideways. I have a lot of theories, but they all come back to, I do not think under any circumstances she put herself into that garbage chute.
You're correct. I think there's a 0% chance she did that to herself.
Yeah.
It's just, given everything, weighting it all together, the question then becomes, if she didn't do it, who did it? If you have a gut feeling, you have a gut feeling. My question is, what can you prove beyond reasonable doubt, or even just like civilly, right? Like preponderance of the evidence, like what can you prove? And stuff starts to add up. Definitely. Mm-hmm. It starts to add up when you look at opioid bruises on her arms and you look at what somebody does to a computer in the moments after someone did. We don't know where the phone was, if it really was repaired. We don't know if it was at the apartment or if it was at the repair shop at the time. We don't know what happened to the SIM card afterwards. We don't know who it was given to.
Why were all of her outgoing emails deleted?
That's the other issue, and I did want to bring that up. The horrific decision from the coroner to state that this was unequivocally a freak accident has closed the door for Phoebe's family when they wanted to go to Google and say, hi, Phoebe used Gmail. We need to get her outgoing emails. Can we have them? Google said, absolutely. We always comply. Could you show us where the cause of death was homicide? And they said, no, we cannot. And Google said, I'm so sorry. We can't help you.
God.
And so my thing would be, how do we lobby Google to let them emails free?
Yeah.
I get it that that's their policy, but should it be? I mean, and that's the other problem. What if you say, okay, well, we're going to appeal this finding. Can we have those emails? What was in those emails and why did they all get deleted? That's the other thing I want to know.
I mean, if you're looking for person of interest, I would say the person that was last seen with her, the person that lives with her, the person that had access to all of her phones and laptops, all of her belongings, is definitely someone that should be questioned and not given all this courtesy. Like they're a victim
Yes.
And that their privacy should be respected. And, you know, they had a tumultuous relationship. There was evidence of abuse. I don't know why the investigators would not explore that and investigate that further, if not for the fact that he has a super rich dad. He's an ex-Supreme Court judge. His stepmom is a sitting judge. He's super rich. He's hobnobbing with a bunch of celebrities and shit. So he's considered in a different category than others, and that's just how it works, and that sucks. And that's why I'm saying, like, the more people that say, nah, we're not going to put up with this shit anymore, eventually something can change. I think this is one of those situations where it absolutely, the rich and powerful won.
Oh, definitely. And it makes you ask, do we want us as a society to have a category of victims that are less cared about, less dead?
Right.
And in this case, I mean, Phoebe had the odds against her in being less powerful than Aunt, but she does at least have the privilege of a family that can fight for her to the extent, I mean, not financially, right? Like, they did as much as they could, having a grandfather that had this criminal background. And what that leads me to wonder is how many more people are killed and because they have substance use issues or mental health issues are completely scraped off and nobody really gives a shit and nobody's making a podcast about them because we just don't even know about it because it was so buried deep. And at least her mother had the wherewithal to reach out to Richard Baker and Michael Batchelard. They had the thought to actually make the podcast, to write the articles. Thank God for all of them for doing that so that we're at least talking about it. But if you say, well, we're covering this case, but there's so many more other victims, well, I think what it is we look at it and go, okay, what can this tell us, this microcosm tell us about society as a whole? And to me, it's, I don't want to see deference. I don't care how rich you are, especially if it takes 2 seconds to ask the family, so are they pretty happy together? Or, you know, was there anything weird? And if you say, I can tell you with honesty that within the past week, he screamed directly into her face in front of witnesses and called her 1,000,000 times in 1 hour, then I think you as a trained investigator should go, there's evidence of domestic violence here. There's evidence of abuse, whether it's emotional abuse or physical abuse. There is evidence of abuse here. So I'm not going to immediately be extremely deferential to this person. Maybe you're like, okay, I want to get him to talk, so I'm going to be kind of nice to him. Fair enough. Totally fair enough. Keep his ass out of the apartment. Keep him away from the computer. Track the fucking cell phone down within a few days. Pick up the CCTV footage. Figure out who ripped the logbook out. Why didn't anybody close Eric Giamaro's office up? You know, figure out who the hell is coming up and talking to the concierge and why they're trying to sweeten the deal. There just was such a failure of investigation, and I think it was exactly what you said, completely due to the fact of who it was. And then, sadly enough, we see, you know, it's 2 years after Phoebe's Fall comes out that this happens to another family. It's just absolutely heart-wrenching, and they don't have justice either. Neither of these families have justice. And
if you've done it twice, it stands to reason you might do it a third time.
If we're asking ourselves, let's just forget about Ann Hampel for a minute. He's been cleared by the coroner, and he's not responsible for either of these deaths, and we're not suggesting otherwise. So put that in a box to the side. Hypothetically speaking, I think it is likely or possible in a heated, emotionally abusive relationship, either between a 49-year-old and a 23-year-old or between a 40-something-year-old and a 20-something-year-old, you know, a couple years before. In either case, if a person over whom you exercise a great amount of power due to your job, your age, your sex, your familial connections, decides that they had enough of your shit and they're leaving you, and nobody tells you what you're going to do. Nobody tells you who you are. Nobody tells you, I'm the one in charge. Give me your arm, leaving opioid bruises, whatever. I don't think that there's some premeditation. Okay, this is going to be the day I do it, that I'm going to go kill this person. But I do think there are statistics to back me up and other cases anecdotally that we've covered where you might have a person who has a predilection for explosive anger, abuse of a young woman, a much, much younger woman, that if something happens in the heat of passion, you panic, you freak out. And like you said, if it worked one time to make it look like a suicide, it might work the other. Yeah. That's speaking completely hypothetically about young women with substance use issues in inappropriate relationships with men that are much, much older. And I think, in my opinion, taking advantage of them.
Yeah, I think, and this again is just speculation on my part,
Nope, it's your opinion based on the evidence that we presented.
It's my
opinion. And the
evidence.
Hold on, let me pull up the statute. The evidence widely available in the public media.
Well, this though, what I'm about to say is what I think may have happened. Based on evidence, based on the scene of the apartment, that there were 2 glasses in there, that there were candles lit, the straightener's plugged in, like she's getting ready to go out. Her body is found in a state of half undressed, perhaps, or perhaps she was getting dressed. I think that I don't buy that Aunt got there after. I think both of them were already at the apartment and a fight ensued and things escalated. And I do agree that I don't necessarily think it was premeditated, but more of explosive. And in the heat of the moment, something happened and he disposed of her.
Well, and I think one of the big issues we have is, when did she go down the garbage chute? We could have known if they took a core body temperature at the scene. Or my thing was like, okay, couldn't you have tracked the order of the garbage being thrown away? We leave stuff in our garbage all the time that says whose it is. Yeah. So if she was in there on top of a bag of garbage and then another bag came down after her, all you have to do is ask the person, approximately, when did you throw this away? Oh, okay, you threw that bag away at 5:45 and that person threw their bag away at 7:30. Okay, well then we have CCTV footage of you walking, which they didn't have footage in the hallways. But we say, based on, I was watching this on TV, so it was probably about 7:30 when you would have at least something to go off of. But just the absolute bungling of the investigation, we'll never know. But you're right. I think if I were a betting person, I think her time of death was sometime between 6:09 p.m. and 8 p.m.
Yeah, and right now it's just
6:09 p.m. and 7 p.m. I'll say
sometime between noon and 6:09, or whenever she was found, is when it happened. Well, that's a whole day.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think a lot of things could be answered, and there's a lot of just like almost intentionally unanswered questions and loose ends that weren't tied up, that it seems to me as an outsider, based on everything we know, could easily be figured out.
And I'll conclude my what do we think, quoting Christina Hampel. You and your family were let down by the justice system and those who represent it. I only hope that one day the truth will come out so that they will have some peace. I agree with you, Christina Hampel, 100%.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And Lauren said, we're hoping a pang of conscience hits and some information's brought to light. Judging by that post alone, it seems like she has a conscience and things are creeping up on her. Maybe she's the one that ends up being able to break this wide open.
I think someone knows something and just has not come forward yet.
Someone always knows something.
Absolutely. Someone knows somebody that was a rookie cop at the time, or a crime scene tech, or the EMT overheard something, or the concierge or the building manager saw something, or one of the million construction workers was around that might have heard or saw something. I really do think that there are people out there that are afraid to come forward. And I want to say, fuck them Hampels. Come forward and you should just come forward.
Yeah.
Also, I want to say to the Hampel family, not Christina, she's cool, but Ann Hampel, anybody that covered up. I don't have a lot of money. I have a lot of student loans. So you got to give the way the way America works.
Trying to sue us. You're not going to get shit.
The way America works is judgment creditors go way behind student loan creditors. So you're welcome to. That's okay. But just know Sally Mae has got your ass. So Godspeed. Best of luck.
Yeah. Somebody knows something. And like you said, one of those people or somebody closer to the situation, a friend, you know, I mean, it seemed like there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen, especially right after everything took place. People are coming in and out of the apartment, doing all sorts of shit. I would venture to say more than one person knows what happened.
Oh, so, for sure. Or has fragments and all of those people coming together at once. Don't even call us. Call Richard Baker, Michael Bachelard. They're amazing journalists. They're covering other cases on the Phoebe's Fault podcast. I'm sure they would love to listen to you. Kind of like we saw with Chris Lambert here and the Kristen Smart case, I want you to know that just because you think you have one single piece of evidence and you're just some nobody and nobody cares about what you have to say, that is not true. Reach out to them. I don't care. Reach out to us.
Yeah.
Whatever. We're not there, but I'll come to Victoria.
We'll find an email address to those dudes. Yeah, for sure. Everybody at the end of the day, hopefully wants justice for every case that we cover, because the reality is, this could be you. It could be your loved one. And if it was, wouldn't you want justice and to, be able to clear someone's name and also not make them in the media just painted as this addict, this suicidal addict, when she was not even that and so much more than that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we all want justice. We all have to decide that our voices are not small. And even if it's hard to stand up and do the right thing, that's what you got to do.
Be like Deborah Samensima and say the thing that needs to be said, even when it's scary and even when it's risky. And I seeing the good that Chris Lambert did with the Kristen Smart case, I don't lose hope, because that was 20-something years and extremely tenuous evidence. And so I think that this wasn't as far back as that. There's a lot more, I think, even digital evidence that maybe could still be probed or tracked down or found or something. So I would say don't give up hope, because Len, Lauren, and Natalie and her brothers and sister and everybody, none of them gave up. So,
yeah. Well, we certainly hope that more comes out about this in the way that we want it to, and that the Handsjuks are able to find justice and some type of closure.
I did want to add one more thing.
Yes,
I just want to tell you a quick fact about the civil justice system in the United States.
Please.
Did you know, if you sue somebody for defamation, that truth is an absolute defense for defamation? And so if you have a trial where you bring a bunch of evidence out to prove the truth of the statement that you asserted, boy, you could get a lot done in a defamation case.
Wow. Okay.
I'm just putting that out there in case anybody was unaware of how it really worked in the United States. But I'm just saying it's a possibility.
If someone was going to sue me for defamation, I think I would have the facts to back up why I said what I said, because little thing about podcasting is, if you're a responsible podcaster, you fact check all your sources and you have links to all of your sources. And you also, much like people that commit crimes, you cover your ass so you don't get in trouble for stuff.
A trial that's one way to get facts out, is all I'm saying.
Well, if you know anything, like we said, you can contact the Victoria Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. Yes, that is an actual number. I did have to look it up because they have one less number than we do in their phone numbers.
6 instead of 7 there at the end after 1-800.
Interesting how those things all work. Who knows? To say why anybody does anything? But yeah, well, that's 3 parts. And if you're listening, Handsjuks, know that we stand with you.
Definitely.
And the Schneiders as well.
Oh, yeah. You all deserve justice, and we're sorry you haven't gotten it this far.
Yes. And if any of the Hamples are listening, go fuck yourself, unless you're Christina, and then email us.
Yeah, let us know what happened.
Yeah.
We're here to listen, or like I said, Richard Baker, Michael Batchelard, I'm sure they would take it and run with it.
There you go. We love providing Sinisterhood to you at no cost, so if you like what you hear, consider supporting the show by donating to our Patreon. We're a small operation, creating the show for you by researching, writing, recording, and producing it ourselves. Any amount is sincerely appreciated and helps offset the cost of making and hosting the show.
As a thank you, you'll also get some sweet perks like ad-free episodes, a Sinisterhood sticker, membership to our exclusive Patreon Facebook group for those in the Rolling the Airwaves and Getting Into It tier, a special shout-out on the show, a monthly bonus mini-sode, and patron-exclusive video and audio content, including Am I the Asshole?, relationship advice, Judge Christie, Dear Sinister, true crime headlines, and more. And patrons at the Getting Into It tier are also able to vote on a bonus content segment each month that they would like to see us live stream.
They're also able to vote on a episode topic that we cover, and this was the one that they selected, which ended up turning into 3 parts. Yes. You also have the fun perk of access to our Discord server, where you can connect with other fans in real time and discuss the latest in true crime, share personal ghost stories, or just post adorable pictures of your pets. We hop on occasionally, and we host monthly Q&As on Crowdcast, where you can ask us all your burning questions.
For patrons not in the U.S., you have the option to pay in pounds or euros, saving you the cost of the conversion fee. Annual memberships for all tiers are also now available. Those that select this option will be rewarded with a free month of membership.
For more details on all of this and specific member tiers, visit Sinisterhood.com and click Patreon on the top banner. And make sure you stick around after our sign-offs to hear your shout-out.
So many of you have been tagging us in pictures of you sporting your sweet Sinisterhood merch. Keep those pictures coming. If you want to get some cool Sinisterhood swag like t-shirts, mugs, totes, and even clothes for your kiddos, visit Sinisterhood.com and click shop on the top banner.
The best thing you can do to help us grow is like, review, and follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell a friend who you think would like us to check us out. You can also share any episode by clicking the 3 dots in the top right corner and share topic-based playlists from Spotify by visiting Sinisterhood.com/playlist. All of this means so much to us and really helps podcasts like us get more exposure.
Can I give you 2 facts about Sinisterhood that I learned from our Spotify Wrapped as podcasters?
Yeah.
We are in the top 1% of the most followed podcasts and the top 1% of the most shared podcasts.
What?
So thank you to everybody for sharing us.
That makes me feel so good. I never thought I'd be a 1%er.
Here we are, much like the Hells Angels. Where you might think like Occupy Wall Street 1%er. I'm thinking like motorcycle 1%ers. But we thank you so much, because it said that I think by like 50% or more, the sharing came from people texting each other. So we really appreciate that. Exactly what Christy said.
Wait, are you saying of all podcasts on Spotify, we're in the top 1% of people following?
Give me 1 second to confirm, because I don't want to lie to you. But yes, but yeah, I mean, I have it. Hold on. Yeah, it says. Congrats, you're in the top 1% of most followed podcasts. And it says your podcast was in the top 1% most shared globally. Wow. Here's how your listeners spread the word. 48% text. See, sometimes I worry about my memory. 29% direct link. 12% other. So I don't know what that is. Whispering or note cards or something. And
carrier pigeon.
6% WhatsApp and 5% Facebook. So whatever percentage, however you did it, we thank you very much, because
that's amazing.
Yeah, it made us feel very loved.
That does. That makes me feel great. That's the best birthday gift I could have, since when this comes out, it is technically my birthday.
Well, and I wanted to say that because I want to say thank you. Y'all did that, and they followed the directions. And I'm sure people on Apple are doing it, and Pocket Cast and all the other apps, or Patreon or whatever. It's just they don't send us a fun thing at the end of the year saying that.
That's true. Spotify does have the market on the fun thing that everybody gets to share, and you get to see all the stuff you did.
That's how they suck you in to get you. Well, we appreciate you and wanted to say thank you very, very much.
Yes, thank you.
You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Sinisterhood Pod, and like us on Facebook at Sinisterhood. We're also on YouTube and TikTok at Sinisterhood Podcast. Christy, where are you at?
I'm on Instagram at Christy M. Wallace, and Twitter and TikTok at Christy or GTFO. Heather?
I'm on Twitter at MCK versus the world, and I'm on TikTok and Instagram at Heather versus the world.
As always, the devil rules the airwaves.
Keep it creepy. Hey everybody, thank you so much for supporting the show on Patreon. Here are your special Patreon shout-outs. Gretchen Shoemaker,
Kimberly Leanne,
Karen Kirschenmann,
Maria Gerstorfer,
Melissa Siegler,
Charlotte Taylor,
Allison Brown,
Cora Polson,
Shannon Hembry,
Catherine Geisler,
Lisa Leah,
Tracy Williams,
Original Basement Girl,
Margaret,
Tina Eder,
Julia French,
Elodie Boyson,
Angelina,
Mayab O'Brien,
Tammy McGowan,
Mac French,
Haley Hughes,
Beatrice Roman,
Kayla Combs,
Amy,
Amanda Majors,
Brandy L. Brown,
Sam Gardner,
Taylor Miller,
Jessica Eastock,
Cat to be Kitten Me,
Kat,
Bren,
Cricket Summer,
Megan Glebe,
Alexa Darchie,
Kalia Copenhaver,
Lynn Never,
Madison Borales,
Samantha Evans,
Kathy Donovan,
Eve,
Brittany B.,
Parker Caps,
David Hayner,
Danica West,
Catherine Chamberlain,
Lee Finner,
Casey,
Hallie Olson,
Markia Scarlett,
Jenna Squires,
Amber Walker,
Logan Thor Jones,
Heather Phillips,
Jerry DeBose,
Stasia Kemp,
Madison Gutwine,
Joy Curl,
Brandy Ackman,
Laura C. Souter,
and Amanda Jenkins. Thank you all so much for supporting the show. We could not do this without you. We hope we pronounced your names correctly. If we didn't, we sincerely apologize, but we love you so much. Thank you for allowing us to do what we love to do. We couldn't without you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep it creepy.
Sinisterhood.